Well, anyway, let's move on from that because, the biggest story of the day and the one that we're most excited about covering, well, I don't know if we're excited in a positive or in a negative way, but is that Bob Mueller press conference from last week and some of the follow-on, things that came after that.
Good old Bobby.
Oh, boy. I tell you what. For somebody who doesn't have anything to say, sometimes he sure has a lot to say. But, I personally, as an attorney, I was kind of put off by his press conference because, within the context of this press conference, he said a number of different things, and we want to cover those in some detail for you here on the show. I want to really bring you, some of the things he said, probably the most controversial or most reported thing, and the thing that's leading to impeachment is something that he said about whether or not the president committed a crime. But I'm going to show you how, within the context of just a 10-minute little, what he called a press conference, and it's hard to call something a press conference if you don't actually take questions from the press.
It's just a statement.
That's just a read statement. Mm-hmm. You could have recorded it at your desk and just sent that out.
Could have just tweeted it.
It's not really a press conference, right? But anyway, so he said things about what the president did, but in other parts of his little press conference, he said things about the correct way that the Justice Department is supposed to deal with these issues. And, and he also talked about the unfairness of making sort of spurious allegations that aren't based in a court of law. So just making allegations about the president. We're going to get to that, some of that, which he talked about. But let's start out with probably what was the most considered to be the biggest bombshell, and it's resulted in this huge push for impeachment. A significant minority of the Democrat caucus in Congress has been now signing on to the idea that they want to pursue impeachment proceedings against the president. And, I encourage that if they want to waste their time on that, to go for it. Although I think really it's going to be a real negative thing for the country. But I don't think they're going to get the result that they wanted. And I'm just using the Bill Clinton impeachment proceedings as my historical example, because that kind of blew up in the Republicans' face. Mm-hmm. It actually made Clinton more popular. It humanized him in a lot of ways. And this kind of impeachment proceeding will probably do the same thing for Trump, particularly if he declassifies some of those documents that really show how they abused the intelligence services and the FISA process against him. But let's hear from Bob Mueller on his sort of marquee statement that he made during his read statement.
And as set forth in the report after that investigation, if we had confidence that the president clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so. We did not, however, make a determination as to whether the president did commit a crime.
Okay, so he basically said, we didn't make a determination, but if we had confidence that we could exonerate the president, we would have exonerated him. Well, one, that's not really a prosecutor's job to exonerate somebody or not. I mean, it's very hard to prove a negative, right? It's very hard to prove that somebody didn't do something, and that would be an exoneration. What our system of justice is built around is the standards of guilty or not guilty. And, beyond that, that's really all there is. We don't get into whether or not you're actually innocent, but what we say is you are presumed innocent if you are not proven guilty. And that's the longstanding presumption of innocence that exists in Anglo-American jurisprudence. It's one of the fundamental aspects of our law. And so, for Mueller to say that we couldn't definitively clear the president of wrongdoing, that really wasn't your job, and the truth of the matter is probably nobody could ever do such a thing definitively. But nevertheless, that's the statement that he wanted to make, and I think he wanted to make that statement because he's trying to encourage impeachment proceedings. And you'll hear another statement that he talks about longstanding Justice Department policy as though that had some influence on why he made his decision. Let me play that clip for you.
Under longstanding department policy, a president cannot be charged with a federal crime while he is in office. That is unconstitutional. Even if the charge is kept under seal and hidden from public view, that too is prohibited. The special counsel's office is part of the Department of Justice, and by regulation, it was bound by that department policy. Charging the president with a crime was therefore not an option we could consider.
First time we ever heard that, right? I mean, why did we do this then? What was the point? No, he's essentially trying to make an excuse. He's essentially trying to say the reason we didn't charge the president is because of longstanding Justice Department policy, not because he didn't commit the crime.
Exactly.
But here's the point. Mueller even says they didn't have enough evidence to charge him. I mean, they didn't have the evidence. Oh, folks, it just infuriates you to listen to some of these folks and some of the hypocrisy that they engage in. And we got a lot more on his press conference to cover. When we get back from the break. Unfortunately, we're coming up on a hard break again, so stick around. We're going to cover the rest of the press conference, and then we're going to give you President Trump's response to it, and you're going to love that. So stick around on the Morgan Streetman Show on Money Talk 1010, 92.1 FM, 103.1 FM, and MorganStreetMedia.com.
Back on the Morgan Streetman Show, Robert Mueller really stirred the pot last week when he came out and said a lot. But then also, what did he not say that people are taking and making conjecture about?
That's right. Well, the big talk everywhere is impeachment now. Everybody's on board with impeachment because of what he said. But let's pick back up with what Bob Mueller actually said about what his group determined. Because, I mean, if they made a determination that the president committed a crime, they would have said that. They didn't say that he didn't commit a crime, but I mean, it's kind of left him in a limbo, and that's where really the presumption of innocence comes in. But let's hear what Bob Mueller had to say about their determination.
So that was Justice Department policy. Those were the principles under which we operated, and from them we concluded that we would not reach a determination one way or the other about whether the president committed a crime. That is the office's final position. And we will not comment on any other conclusions or hypotheticals about the president.
Wow, must be nice. You get paid $40 million. All you got to do is a 10-minute press conference. You're like, hey, I'm not saying anything else. That's it. That's all you get. That's for your $40 million. And just keep in mind that the one crime that they're saying is still out there as they can't take a position on. We couldn't possibly decide whether this evidence amounts to a crime or not. That is simply the obstruction of justice crime, because the conspiracy crime, the collusion crime, he already said in his report there's no evidence for that. There was no evidence that anyone from the Trump campaign, and most particularly the president himself, participated in any conspiracy with the Russians. Now let's hear, because I want to jump back now in the press conference, because a lot of folks might have missed this, but when I heard it, I thought, wow, what an interesting statement, Mr. Mueller. What an interesting statement. So you do understand the presumption of innocence, because he talked about it in reference to the allegations against some of those Russians that they've indicted, which he reminds us are only allegations. So let's hear about the presumption of innocence, and then let's wonder, why isn't that presumption given to the president?
Every defendant is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty.
Hello? Every defendant is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty, except Donald John Trump.
Democrats didn't hear that.
Yeah, apparently not. Nobody was paying attention. Well, let's hear something else that Mueller said about how it's unfair to just kind of make these spurious allegations about the president in a context where he doesn't have an ability to respond, at least in a court. You know, the thing gets decided eventually. Somebody decides whether you are guilty or not guilty eventually, and then it's over. If you just make a bunch of allegations and throw a bunch of, slander against somebody out there in the public, and it's never decided, it's kind of a way to ruin somebody's reputation very unfairly.
It would be unfair to potentially accuse somebody of a crime when there can be no court resolution of the actual charge.
You know what I feel like is happening?
What's that?
I feel like it's a game where Barr was getting all the attention. William Barr was getting all the attention because he was the last person to have spoken. Mm-hmm. And now Robert Mueller has to come in and have the last or most recent word. So everyone's giving credence to what he's saying.
Yeah.
It's just a big game in the media. Who's ever the most recent person to talk, that's the side that's supposed to be the truth.
Right. Well, and I mean, this really shouldn't be going on in this way, because these two gentlemen should not be competing with each other for media coverage and control the story. But it is apparent that that's what's going on. Now, I suspect that Bob Mueller was sort of, well, first of all, I believe fairly strongly that his statement at the press conference there was probably written by Andrew Weissman, that just because of the way he phrased it, we, a lot of times. And somebody said, is that the royal we? No, I think that's because Weissman was writing the statement. So that's why he was actually speaking in his own voice about the investigation. But, I really I'm amazed that Mueller thinks he can come out and just give a 10-minute press conference, and that's going to be it. And he says, the report's got to speak for itself. I don't want to give any testimony that's not in the report, et cetera, et cetera. Well, you want to know what that means? That means he doesn't want to be cross-examined. Let's hear him tell it himself.
Now, I hope and expect this to be the only time that I will speak to you in this manner. I am making that decision myself. No one has told me whether I can or should testify or speak further about this matter. There has been discussion about an appearance before Congress. Any testimony from this office would not go beyond our report. It contains our findings and analysis and the reasons for the decisions we made. We chose those words carefully, and the work speaks for itself. And the report is my testimony. I would not provide information beyond that which is already public in any appearance before Congress. So beyond what I've said here today and what is contained in our written work, I do not believe it is appropriate for me to speak further about the investigation or to comment on the actions of the Justice Department or Congress. And it's for that reason I will not be taking questions today as well.
If the written report was his testimony, then why did he need to come out and give a press conference at this point in time, right? Why? Mm-hmm. He needed to do it because the narrative in the media wasn't going the way the Democrats wanted, and they needed some ammunition to get it going back their direction, back towards impeachment, or at least that's what they thought. But what's the real reason? I think it's pretty arrogant for somebody to take $40 million and then just act like that they are the sovereign. They are the law. It's not the rule of law. It's the rule of man. It's not what does the law say or what does a subpoena say. It's what I say. And I say I'm not coming to testify for you guys in Congress. And so don't even bother sending me a subpoena because I'm not going to talk anything more than my report.
Do you think one day President Trump will go to jail when he's no longer president?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. Okay. I don't think he did anything wrong. At least not in this context. Now, look, I'm sure there's some shady business dealings that have occurred. I don't know about them, though, and we ought to be a little bit more generous than that because here we are talking about the presumption of innocence. Unless somebody can prove the guy did something wrong, we ought to just assume he didn't do anything wrong. So I don't have any knowledge of some of those, satellite sort of business issues that may well have something in them. I don't know. But with respect to this Russian conspiracy or Russian collusion, I think that the book is pretty much closed on that. Now, I want to say, but see, Bob Mueller doesn't want to be, this is the key, he doesn't want to be cross-examined. First of all, a written report is an out-of-court statement. That's what's called hearsay.
And why does he not want to be cross-examined?
Because there's some hard questions coming for Bob Mueller that he's not going to be able to answer in a very convincing fashion, and it's going to blow his whole report to shreds. For example, I just jotted down a few of them myself. And, one of them is, when did he know that there was no conspiracy? Because we now know that it was like by the end, I think it was December of 2017, they had already established there was no conspiracy between the Trump campaign and the Russians to interfere in the election, period, the end. So from the end of 2017 to the present day, essentially, they've simply been investigating the obstruction claim. The idea that the president obstructed justice. Well, why wouldn't they have, a year and a half ago come out and told the American public the important information that, hey, we haven't finished our investigation and we can't provide for you all of our final conclusions, but we can provide for you this conclusion. Your president did not conspire with the Russians to steal the election. That much we've established, and because it's extreme public importance, we just want to get that out to you folks now so that we can stop the next year and a half of media assault saying the president committed treason, which is just slandering him. But no, Bob Mueller let all that go on. So you don't think this was a political hit job? So he doesn't want to be asked when he knew that there was no conspiracy and why he didn't come out and make some public comment then.
What else would you ask?
Why didn't you question Peter Strzok and Lisa Page about their obviously biased text messages? Remember, he just removed them. He didn't even question them about them. He didn't say, hey, what the hell's going on here, you two? This is BS. You guys are crazy. Why didn't you tell me about this, that you guys had all this personal correspondence that somebody one day could find about how much you hated the president? How about this? What was the insurance policy, Mr. Mueller, and did you investigate that? Because remember, he started out with the Russian conspiracy, but then his grant of authority was so broad that he was allowed to look into other crimes that he came across, and he's made several other referrals. Remember, he looked into Michael Cohen's taxi medallions. Oh, God, what could be more important than that? So why didn't he just ask Peter Strzok and Lisa Page and maybe yank Andy McCabe in and say, hey, I want to hear from each of you. What was the insurance policy? Because it's his investigation. His ongoing investigation is the insurance policy. So he wouldn't want to answer that kind of a question from a Republican. How about why didn't you get a hold of the DNC server? Why did you accept hearsay from a third-party DNC contractor, CrowdStrike, who their report says that they were hacked by the Russians and therefore we, the FBI, believe it? Okay, well, guess what other DNC report came out recently? The Steele dossier, and that's been widely admitted to be a complete fraud. So when you hire these third parties to do reports for you in a political context, you don't always get true information. So why wouldn't the FBI just say, you know what, DNC, this is really important. If the Russians really tried to steal our elections, you have to give us your server, and we have to get to the bottom of this. I mean, Bob Mueller said that much. We have to get to the bottom of these issues, but he didn't do it. He had, almost 3 years to do it, I guess more like 2, but he had a long time to do it and millions and millions and millions of dollars, and he didn't even get to the bottom of it.
Why isn't the mainstream media bringing up any of these questions that you're asking right now?
Oh, well, this is a great question, and I think President Trump would say that because the mainstream media is the enemy of the people. And that's his point. They're not bringing true information to the people. They're not bringing logic and reason. They're not getting people to think about the issues in a real context. They're instead trying to bamboozle people with propaganda.
And headlines. Quick headlines.
Yeah. And everybody's got such a short attention span anymore that they seem to be winning the battle in some ways. But thank goodness for our show and the folks that are listening to our show, because I know there's a bunch of them out there. Folks have been writing me. They appreciate this content. So we are making a difference. We're having an impact. And there are some folks out there that aren't buying the media propaganda hook, line, and sinker. And I think that's a really good thing. Another question for him is, why didn't he interview Julian Assange? I know.
I've been wondering that all along. We're talking about these two stories, but yet they're not coming together in an obvious way.
Julian Assange basically said, I'm here. I'm ready to talk to you guys. I know what actually happened. No, we don't need to interview him. CrowdStrike told us it was the Russians.
Not anymore. He doesn't know what happened if he took those memory pills.
Well, isn't that the problem? And that was what I was kind of getting at, is why the rush to erase the guy's mind now all of a sudden.
The British are trying to get him to talk?
Well, I don't know if they're trying to get him to talk or trying to get it to where he can never talk again.
Oh, yeah.
Because remember what's at the bottom of a lot of this, right? You guys remember this. Oh. Who started this? The British and the Australians. Remember?
Right.
With Stefan Halper and Papadopoulos and Carter Page and luring them over to Britain. And so their intelligence agencies are right in the thick of this attempt to take down a presidential candidate and then a sitting president. Their intelligence agencies are right in the thick of it. So it's really in their interest that Julian Assange never expose what really happened here, because then the whole house of cards could come crashing down around him.
Will we ever have a normal presidential election ever again in this country?
I don't think so.
Oh, wow, Pat. That's
Pat,
a question.
I think we've gotten into the realm now of idiocracy. I think the next thing, maybe we'll see a professional wrestler as a president or something like that. It just seems to be going downhill.
Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.